Today, let's take a look at LTX Director 2.0. This time, it's not a small update. It feels more like LTX 2.3 has been given a small editing desk. You can add a starting frame, add an ending frame, drag a video in and continue extending it. Use Anything LoRA for video editing. And there's also something called Retake Mode, which means you only reshoot a small section in the middle of the video. Let's look at a few results first. In the first example, a glass fishbowl is filled with colorful candy. At the beginning, it sits normally on the table. By the final frame, the glass fishbowl is completely shattered. Take a look at the process in between. The model handles it really well. In the second example, the original video shows a girl riding a horse from the side. If we simply add a prompt afterward and try to change the camera angle, you'll notice that this kind of perspective shift is not ideal. Sometimes it may not work at all, but if we give it an ending frame from a back view angle and use the same prompt, the result becomes completely different. For the third example, let's look at video editing. In the original video, the girl is sitting on a cloud and holding a red balloon. I can change the balloon to blue. This sounds very simple, but if you only use Anything LoRA for editing, you'll find that the result is unstable. At this point, we have a small processing trick: add and edit Anything LoRA. Now let's look at the result again. The last one is retake mode. It's still the same video of the girl sitting on a cloud. We don't edit the entire video. Instead, we only edit a few seconds in the middle and make a giant whale swim past behind the girl. You'll notice that the whale appears beautifully, and in the final frame, the image returns to the original video state. That is what we call retake mode. After seeing these demos, my conclusion is that LTX Director 2.0 itself is indeed quite powerful. But if you want to use it well, you can't just know how to drag in materials. You also need to know what kind of method can actually achieve the final video generation effect. Next, let's look at what exactly has been updated in LTX Director 2.0 compared with version 1.0. First, you can only use LTX Director 2.0 after installing this extension. If version 1.0 was more like a timeline entry point for video generation, then version 2.0 feels more like a small video workstation. I think its core changes mainly come down to four things. The first change is that the video timeline is more complete. You can place images, videos, and prompts on the same timeline. You can trim, stretch, place keyframes at specific time points, and convert a certain keyframe into the final frame. The second change is that the Anything LoRA track has been added or strengthened. The value of this track is that, on one hand, it can help keep a character or object consistent, and on the other hand, it can also be used for video editing. Later, we'll go through a series of test examples. Another change is the retake mode we just mentioned. We can call this feature local reshooting. In the past, if there were 2 seconds in the middle of a video that failed, we could only regenerate the whole thing. But now you can use AI to regenerate just those 2 seconds, while the other parts remain unaffected. The fourth change is project saving and UI interaction. It feels more like editing software. Now, for example, the entire project can be saved as JSON, and in an empty project, we can directly load it back in. All right, now let's look at the workflow. For easier demonstration, I also built the workflow on Running Hub in the ComfyUI field. Running Hub is a very good online workflow platform because whenever a new model or new extension appears, it follows up right away. The core structure of this workflow is not complicated. We can divide it into 5 parts. The first part is model loading. Here we use the LTX 2.3 distilled 1.1 model. Under that, we have the text encoder, Gemma 3, then the video VAN, the audio VAA. In addition, we also have something called Tiny VAE. It is mainly used for node previews. When you actually run this workflow, you'll find that the preview node provided by Kijai lets you see the rough shape of the video fairly early. This helps you judge in advance whether your edit is actually taking effect. The second part is the main LTX Director node. Inside this node, there is frame rate, width, and height timeline data, the global prompt, local prompts, and also our retake settings. The third part is LTX Director Guide. This is very important because when you use Director, you are actually generating some raw materials. If this information is going to truly affect sampling, then we need to use the node we just mentioned, Director Guide. We can inject it into the later sampling process and the latent. Inside this workflow, we mainly use 2 director guides. The first one is for the generation stage, and the second one is for the upscale stage. Here, we use Scale by Pay Attention inside Director. We can set the width and height of the entire video. That is the final generated video resolution. In the first stage, we first scale it down to 0.5 times. Then after the second stage upscale, we make it match the resolution we set. The fourth part is the two-stage sampling we've talked about many times. We use an Euler sampler. The scheduler here is a little special. Then in the second stage, it's also an Euler sampler. Pay attention here. The denoise value in the second stage is not 1. It is 0.42. Some people may think this workflow is a bit complicated, but the thing you really need to understand is just one sentence. LTX Director handles the front-end timeline. Director Guide turns that timeline into sampling guidance. Two-stage sampling takes the video from structure to detail. Then you save it, and that's it. Next is the testing stage that everyone cares about. At the beginning, we already briefly introduced these examples. In this section, we'll explain in detail how each one is done. Let's start with the first case. This is a start frame and end frame example, going from a complete fishbowl to a broken fishbowl. At the very beginning of the timeline, we place the first frame, which is the glass bowl filled with colorful candy. At the end of the timeline, we place the final frame, which is the broken state after it shatters. In the middle, we write a prompt. Translated, it means a slow motion close-up where the glass bowl suddenly breaks and the candy spills out. Now let's look at the generated result. Pay attention to the process in the middle. It is not simply blending two images together. In the middle, there is a hand and there is an action, and that action causes the whole fishbowl to break. For a video of around 5 seconds, I think this is already very interesting. So the first trick is, if you know what state the video should end in, you should definitely use an end frame. Don't expect the prompt alone to solve the entire direction of the video. If you don't believe it, let's keep going. The second case is video extension. There are also two ways to extend a video. For example, with the video below, this is a video of a beautiful girl riding a horse. Our goal is very simple. We want the video to continue forward, and then we want the camera to become a back view of the girl riding the horse. As we mentioned earlier, there are two ways to do it. The first is the most direct method. Use a prompt. In the prompt, we emphasize from back view, girl riding a horse away from camera, which means we want it to become a back view angle. So how is the result? You'll notice that the video does get extended, but the problem is that the back view angle does not appear. So in this situation, you can see that the guiding ability of the prompt is not enough. What should we do then? We need to add a fake frame, which is the end frame. Actually, this trick is the same as the start frame and end frame method we mentioned earlier. Now we use the same prompt and look at the final generated result. You'll notice that this time, the effect is obviously much better. The camera direction, the character's orientation, and the horse's direction are all closer to the extension we wanted. The core here is not how advanced the term fake frame sounds. The real point is that you need to give the model a visual anchor. It needs a reference point, and only then will the generation be more stable. For the third case, let's look at video editing. Video editing is probably the most anticipated part of LTX Director 2.0. Our input video is a girl sitting on a cloud, holding a red balloon in her hand. First, let's do a simple edit, change the red balloon to blue. This sounds very easy. Let's actually try it. You'll find that this is actually a little difficult. Our prompt is change the red balloon to blue. The result is not very ideal. The balloon color does not really change. This is exactly why many people say LTX Director 2.0 is not easy to use. If you use it only like this, then yes, video editing is not easy to achieve. My solution is to add and edit Anything LoRA. For this LoRA, we use the 9000 step version, because in a previous video, we specifically talked about this LoRA. If you're not familiar with it, you can go watch that video. We added in and set the weight to 1.0 first. At this point, you'll notice that the color of the balloon clearly changes. Next, let's look at a more interesting example. Suppose I want a small cat to appear on the girl's shoulder. The prompt is also very simple. A small cat appear on her shoulder. If we use a normal weight, which is 1.0, the generated result looks like this. Look carefully. There is indeed a little hint of a cat on her shoulder, but it is not obvious. The reason is that the shoulder area is too small. It's hard for the model to generate a clear small animal from scratch in such a tiny pixel area. So if we want the cat to be more obvious, what should we do? You can increase the weight of the edit Anything LoRA, for example, to 1.5 or 2.0. Now let's look at the generated result again. This time the cat is indeed much more obvious. But the cost also appears. The character's face and some local structures start to be affected. Finally, let's look at retake mode. This is not global editing. As we said earlier, it is called reshooting mode. Our original video is still the video of the girl sitting on a cloud. We can click retake mode. Once we enter this mode, you'll notice that the timeline becomes much simpler. We drag the video in, and then we need to set the start frame and the end frame, which define the range we want to modify. Here, I set it from 2 seconds to 6 seconds. Then my prompt is written like this. A giant whale swims past behind the beautiful girl. Pay attention to this result. There are 2 key points. First, the whale does appear, and the whale's size, motion, and integration with the image are all very interesting. It's not simply a pasted image. It really forms a new subject with motion and a new event. Second, many people have probably noticed that at the end of the video, the whale disappears. That's because this is called retake mode. In other words, it needs to respect the front and back boundaries of the original video. It will try to reshoot within the area you selected, but when it reaches the ending boundary, it has to return to the original video state. That is why it is called retake, not edit whole video. To summarize, the value of LTX Director 2.0 is not that it suddenly turns LTX 2.3 into a completely different model. Its real value is that it turns the whole operation process into a director's desk. It becomes easier to control, more visual, and more concrete and perceivable. In version 2.0, I suggest you pay attention to 3 things. The first is video editing, which generally uses Anything LoRA. The second is retake mode, which is the reshooting mode. There's also one thing I did not test, which is the audio part. You'll notice that in video extension, the audio results are also pretty good, but I have always believed that audio processing is still a weakness of LTX 2.3. Alright, that's all for today. What are you waiting for? Go try it yourself, follow me, and become someone who truly understands AI.